My name is Lisa Trapp. I am a guidance counselor at Whitney Middle School.
Okay.
My name is Shakira Baisden. I'm an educational therapist at Gilbert Institute, Prospect Primary, West Pembroke, and St. David's Primary.
Wow, that was great. Do a lot of traveling.
Good morning. My name is Kendall Lynn, and I am also a guidance counselor. I'm at Cedar Ridge Academy.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for coming, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much for having us.
Just one other thing as well, Lisa, I'm sorry. If, when, at the end, if you could let us have a copy of your presentation at the end of could we have it? Oh, okay. All right. Okay, I didn't get it, I'm sorry. Okay, right, good, great.
Okay, so we have 15 minutes, so I will take 5, and because you have a copy of
It
the...
won't be,
Yes.
strict.
I'm sure you'll be able to get it. So I'm going to start, and my presentation is entitled "Why Our Boys Are Not Having a Successful Educational Experience," and what can we do as educators? What do we as educators need to know about educating boys? I decided to take this avenue because when we looked at what this commission was designed to research, which is the incidence of guns and violence in the community, and we look at who is committing these offenses. Typically, they are high school dropouts, they have no tertiary education, and do not have stable jobs. More importantly, for the purpose of this presentation, we would say that most of them are males. Most of them are black males. I really haven't seen anything in the news or anything on the street really where I see white males engaged in game type activities. So we're talking about black males. Let me just preface this by saying that this presentation is based on this book, and we tried to get copies of this for the committee. This gentleman, Dr. Leonard Sachs, came down to Bermuda. He was brought in by Montessori, and he happened to do a presentation to the counselors at Bermuda College. However, we were the only ones really other than, actually we did. So I actually probably can make sure that you do get copies of it, just not today. I wasn't able to secure them today, but we have copies at my school. And I would urge all of you to read this. It's not specifically about black males, but certainly there's information in there that is very pertinent to this type of conversation. And so the fact that, most importantly, the people committing these types of crimes are males, it forces us to ask the question, what has happened to the males in our society? And to answer this question, we have to first agree upon what it is that we want for the children of our education system. And as you can see there, these are my thoughts in terms of what we want, which is an early education which is developmentally appropriate, primary, middle, and senior education which meets the students where they are, while still challenging them enough to keep them engaged and committed to the learning process, entrance to higher education and a higher education institution based purely on choice and interest, as opposed to your grades are so low that you can only go here, or your grades are, you don't have a choice basically about what institution accepts you. A successful completion of higher education and the ability to live independently and to support one's lifestyle. I think that if we can agree that that is what we ultimately want for all of our children, then from that point of view, we think, what is the evidence that we are not getting this for our boys? And the research shows that girls are more likely than boys to do well in school. They are more likely to graduate high school. They are more likely to enter college, to do well and graduate on time. And they are certainly more likely to lead independent lives, to be able to support their lifestyle and lead independent lives. There's lots of research that supports that, and the book refers to it, and you can certainly validate those facts yourself. This represents a shift because some people will say, well, haven't the girls always done better? It actually represents a shift because in 1949, 70% of those graduating from college and university were male. these numbers have steadily declined to the point where in 2011, there will be a complete reversal of the 1949 data, with over 70% of college graduates being female. That leaves obviously only about 30% of them being male. Locally, we see the same trends, with most of our high school dropouts being male. Last year, perusing the newspaper, when the high schools placed their graduation people in the newspaper, Cedar Ridge graduated 104 students, and of those, 33 were male. Berkeley graduated 130, and of those, only 33 were male. Just looking at things like, for example, honor rolls, looking at the honor roll at where I teach, M3 last year, 6 out of 38 were male. M2, 4 out of 26 were male. M1, it was 1 out of 18. So, we see this, and it was interesting with Dr. Sack's presentation. Usually when you go into these presentations, you think, okay, what are we going to hear about now? Somebody in the United States doing some type of research that has no bearing on what we see here. But when he started to talk about these, I realized that these are actually boys that I know. These are the boys that I teach. When he started to describe this phenomenon of boys being disinterested in the education process, being disconnected from the education process, not caring about, rather they pass or fail a test and that kind of thing. It was interesting because that is what I'm seeing at the middle school level. So the question then becomes, and I just made this point, which is that another thing that we see locally is entrance at college, both Bermuda College and overseas, and even private schools versus public schools. I can just speak of the class 2 years ago that graduated from Warwick Academy, and as I recall, almost every one of those girls went off to university. I know of at least 10 of the boys who either didn't go at all, or who went and were back home by December. So they went, didn't have a good experience, and were back home. So the fact is that it's not just in public school, it's boys in general. When we look at why the boys are outperforming the girls, the first thing is, the first set of things actually is why
I'm sorry,
why the girls are.
I wish it could be that way.
Yes, exactly. Why the girls are outperforming the boys. There are a couple of things. The first is biological, and this is, I will get into this, but girls actually hear better than boys, and that has been documented from very, very early.
I kept telling my mother
They
she
hear
never listened.
better and they
Never
hear better.
listened. I took a lot of licks around the
Yes, and it actually, what we actually know is that at birth, baby girls hear 7 times better than boys, and this difference is carried on throughout the life cycle. Your grandfather is more likely to have hearing aids than your grandmother, and the research says that the reason for this is that girls have the hair in their ear follicle, the hair in their ear is stronger than males and reverberate sound better. So let's put that in an educational setting and think, okay, girls are hearing better than boys, so that's one factor. We also look at the fact that the boys, girls and boys are wired differently in terms of the makeup of their brain. And this information is new information because 40 years ago, we weren't able to scan brains, and we weren't able to really look and see what was being triggered when and that kind of thing. We can do all that kind of research now. And the research says that 5-year-old, if you scan 5-year-old boys and girls, the Center for Talking, Reasoning, Language Development is totally separate from the region which deals with feelings and emotions in both boys and girls, and that's at 5. By the age of 12 or 13, what they have discovered is that for girls, there is a very definite connection, a blood vessel almost has formed between those 2 areas of the brain. And for boys, they are saying that that area is not connected at 13, at 15, at 16, and well past 20. Now that makes a lot of sense when you think about what it is that we require of middle school students. Because at 12 and 13, we're asking them, whether you're reading Macbeth, you're reading, all those kinds of classic books. And we're saying, the homework assignment is how does so-and-so feel about this, that, or the other? Well, that works for a girl. She can write about, you ask her, she can write about how she feels, how her friend feels, how everybody feels about that. Boys don't have that connection, and so where we see them starting to fail is in middle school, and it is because we are almost developmentally requiring things of them that they really just don't have. And as a result, the girls seem to have a more favorable experience in school because they can give what the teacher asks. They can, and they're more likely to give that. And that is at middle school, and it actually even at preschool. I'm going to do it for 5 minutes. I like doing it for 5 minutes. And it's actually even at preschool.
Speed up, Lakeith.
Yes.
Be a politician, don't worry about time. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
But I just have to say that even at preschool, from the very entrance into the school system, the girls seem to have a more favorable experience than the boys, and it's simply because the area for language development in girls develops 3 years prior in girls than it does in boys. So, for example, if something happens on the playground, and the teacher goes outside and the boy's standing there and he's crying. All he knows is his heart and he's crying. The girls can tell the whole story because they have the language. They can say exactly what happened and what. So that's where the teacher looks. When she's looking for information, she's looking to the girls because they typically have the language ability to do that. Okay, I'll go there down to when we look at what we say that we're looking for, which is all those things that I mentioned earlier. I think the main thing that we need to see is entrance to higher education, completion of that education, and independent lifestyle. And typically, research has associated socioeconomic status with that, parental education, whether or not your parents are college educated, culture, and those kinds of things for determining. Because when you compare groups to groups, you always have, the Chinese coming out on top, and you've got the suburban, white suburbia coming out on top of, the ghetto areas and that kind of thing, and the African communities and all of that kind of thing. So when we compare groups to groups, we already know where everybody lies. But what he says is interesting is that we've seen this phenomenon over the past 40 years where even within the groups and within families, we are seeing a vast difference between boys and girls. So we come from the same household, so it's not that you're in a different socioeconomic group from me, but you as a girl student are performing much better than I am as a boy student. And so that's where it came into.
I know why my sisters are much better than me.
And it's a complex that boys carry because, typically, but that's, and so we say to ourselves, okay, if those things can't account for the differences, then what will account for the differences? And basically what he says is that no matter what the socioeconomic status, no matter what the real success is when they are reading, writing, and comprehending on grade level, when they have academic engagement and social engagement, and all of these things need to be present by the age of 15. And that is the real determining factor in terms of whether or not this child is going to go to college and is going to graduate and is going to be able to go on and live independently. Now, when we look at these factors and we look at, like for example, the boys that leave me are 14 years old and they're going up to the senior level, they are not doing these things. They are typically 2, 3, 4 grades below where they need to be. They are not academically engaged and they are not socially engaged. And they get to the senior school, and I'm sure Kendall will talk when she talks about the senior school, that for that first 2, they get serious about school when they're in S3 and S4, but by that time they have failed all of middle school, they failed S1 and 2, and they can't make it up, and so as a result we have them.
And Lisa, and we're expecting them, maybe what we shouldn't be expecting of them.
Well, yes, we're expecting them to grow at a rate that really is not biologically sound for them to do. And then of course you add into that the social factors of being left behind, of being labeled not as intelligent, and you carry those labels with you, and then there's no surprise in terms of what we get. And I will wrap up with this.
Good, because rather than me tell you to wrap up.
I will wrap.
You only have to speak soft.
Actually, you know what, I will leave it at that. I will get you the
Thanks,
book,
thanks.
I will get you the book, and then you can read it over that. But there are some very significant things that we have done in the past 40 years as a community, and specifically in education, that have contributed to the demise, basically, of our boys.
Thanks. No, let's let Cole first. Cole first. Question. Cole, yes.
Okay. With my approach to, thank you, Lisa, to gun violence and violent crimes, I took the approach of the family. And I believe that the family is the core of who we are as a people in comparison to Middle Eastern countries. If we think of places like China, and we think of the family, we think of green tea, we think of their dress code, maybe their meditation, the times they go to bed, and all these sorts of things that we need to have a look at. And in my approach, I said we need to take a holistic approach. Unfortunately, the infrastructure of Bermuda has changed drastically, I would say, in the last 7 years. Because if we note, in 2004 and 2005, the real estate market was altered in such a way that we outpriced ourselves, and it was a buyer's market. And I know simply because I was buying at the time and selling, and so it was astronomical. And many single parents found it very difficult to even survive. Many were going back home with 3 and 4 children, so the immediate family structure changed. So you would have like mom and dad plus Nana and Papa, those 2 children and their siblings, and the household structure changed considerably because many bedrooms, like when you think of an apartment, that's where I think it became $1,000 a room. So you think of a 3-bedroom apartment, it was $3,000 and maybe $3,500. And who can really pay that if they couldn't pay $1,200 before? So looking at different things like that, I realized that many of our young men, given the research that Lisa basically laid out, they found the need to protect mom. They found the need that if I'm not performing successfully in the classroom, I'm going to go ahead and take matters into my own hand. And I'm going to find ways to provide things for mom that she just doesn't have, that she can't provide for herself. Where's mom going to find this money? Where is she going to be able to provide for the rest of our siblings? My sister seems to be doing okay, so how am I going to get the $1,000 that mom's in need of? And so we've had issues like that. I've also mentioned that as far as divorce being on the rise, single parent homes, spousal abuse, child abuse, suicide, gang violence, drug trafficking, and the like are all at an all-time high. And we may not look at it as the 2004-2005 dilemma playing a role in that, but I believe that it really allowed us as a people to take a dive, because it seemed like the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. And so many of us succeeded at that time, but many of us, I felt like a lot of parents were depressed. We saw the whole infrastructure, even in the classroom, change. Children came to school depressed, unkept, and that trend has followed all the way through. In our education system right now, teachers and school staff are evidently on the front line in the islands crisis. Whilst the Cambridge curriculum is being executed by educators, they are constantly bombarded with inappropriate behaviors, such as inappropriate language, blatant disrespect, bullying, sexual gestures that you wouldn't believe at any given moment in the classroom. And children are basically acting out what they see. We've had a situation at a school I won't name where a child at the age of 5 was acting out what he simply saw on television when he got up at 1 o'clock in the morning to use the bathroom. And not only did he see that, but he acted it out with others at school at 5 years old. So when are we going to take a stand as a people to say, this is what we do in Bermuda? This is how we conduct ourselves. This is what a child knows at the age of 8. I'm not talking about academically, I'm talking about socially. This is, an eye-touch phone is not something an 8-year-old gets. DSI is not something a 3-year-old gets. When are we going to set the standard in place as to how we're going to govern ourselves as parents? And working closely with Martha Dismont at the Family Center, on the Family Forum there, I mentioned a couple months ago that when women are pregnant, they go to the doctor, they are most vulnerable. And I picture it looking something like this. Go to the doctor, there's her pregnancy test. Yes, you're pregnant. Congratulations. April 21st, your baby is due. August the 15th, your first parenting class. At 5:30 at wherever place. October the 15th, your second parenting class. December the 15th, your third parenting class. When are we going to make it or mandate it that we as a people are going to show or set a precedence as a culture as to what we're going to stand for. Because young people are having children, even 4-year-olds are having babies, and they really don't know how to be parents. So when are we going to say that this is what we do as a people? I've interviewed a few single parents, single mothers, and I said as well that in our single parenting homes, we have many grandparents raising children, grandmothers in particular, because now that these young people are getting pregnant, and we're shaking our heads because we know families like that, they're sending their children overseas, but their mom has her life, so grandmother takes over that role. And so in these homes, even grandmothers are in a position where they're not even financially equipped to do what they have to do. Sons, grandsons see that, they're going into the drug trafficking market as well. And I mentioned some of the support that single parents, they were crying out for. They said that even as far as having a part-time job, how are they supposed to support their family? She said, and one lady in particular, she's like, my son sees that, and I know he's caught up into trafficking, but I know he cares about me, so what is it that he's expected to do as my son? And I'm not condoning what he does, but I'm being honest, when he brings that money home, it supports me. He's in a gang, his daddy's not there, so he's really loving what's happening in that particular culture. And she says, I need more babysitting support, but then the babysitting fees, I can't afford that. So I need support as far as another group where I can go and meet with someone a group of people who are single parents who can offer me suggestions as to how to run this household, because I feel inadequate. My son sees that, he's taken over in ways that are illegal. And so that was one of the things that they mentioned as a whole. Also in these support groups, a lot of these women were saying that no one ever told them how to manage finances. No one told them how much to put aside for rent, for groceries, however. A lot of them said that in carpooling, they've had to get rid of their cars, sell their cars, because they can no longer maintain not only rent, but transportation. And is there a team of people that will come together to say, look, this is what we can do. I'm a single parent as well, so can we come together, and if we're all going in the same direction, can we carpool? I'll help with maintenance and gas and so on and so forth. So these are just some suggestions that they had. Also with, I mentioned about, and I was mentioning also that this aforementioned statement may seem like it's not related to violence, but a dysfunctional home most often than not can produce angry, violent, dysfunctional children. As a behavior therapist, if I go into a classroom and I see a child literally crawling on the floor, it's happened. I would excuse the child, and one of the first things I ask him after giving him a hug, like, to let him know I'm not judging you, where's daddy? 99.9% daddy's not there. When are we as a people going to define for our men what it is to be a father? So it's like, yay, okay, I'm having a baby, now let's go have a drink. So in mandatory parenting classes, we'll clearly define what it is to be a father, what it is to be a mother. That, hey, 7:30 is a really good time for a child under 5. Or, this is how we're going to govern ourselves as far as diet. Okay, this is how we're going to govern ourselves as far as what we allow our children to watch. I know in my household, TV is not allowed through the week. And it's clearly shown in my children's academic achievement. And so when are we going to come together as a team to clearly define what we as a people, no matter what your race is, what we as a people are going to put forth as our core values. There's a family I know in Spanish Point right now, and for several years, every Thursday, the grandmother has all the extended family come over. No matter where they are in school, all her grandchildren come from St. David's and Somerset, they all come over on Thursday night. It's been going on for years. And that's what she's committed to. So maybe as a team, what we can call for is the pillars of every family. For instance, there could be a family member who's committed to the young people. That's my role in my family. And every other Friday, every other Saturday, I have a wee party at my house. So all the extended cousins, they come to my house for a wee party. And I can tick off about 10 of them, their fathers are absent. But they know that we're going to come together at this time, we're going to rub shoulders with our first cousins, and I've seen some of our cousins, our family members, taking over the behavior caseloads, so the family needs to be put back in place. And the innovative, one of the ways, which I feel is very important, is to start at ground zero.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great presentation. That presentation was like that song you sang.
Okay, good morning once again. Again, my name is Kendall Liu. I'm not only a counselor at Cedar Ridge Academy, but I'm also the counselor representative on the executive board for the Bermuda Union of Teachers. And in preparing my presentation, I did ask school counselors what would they like shared in this forum. So what I have prepared is really a reflection and a response to what counselors had given me, and these are counselors in the public school system at all levels. There are 5 concerns that I will summarize. The first is the sense of fear felt by many students, either students who have witnessed violent crimes, students who have lost family members as a result of violent crimes or gun violence, or students who just hear about it in the newspaper or on the news and do not feel safe any longer. And we see that there is a lack of safety, feeling of safety or fear in students' writing, when they're writing essays, in their artwork, in classroom discussions, or even how they carry themselves on a day-to-day basis. And again, that's at all levels, from elementary right on up to senior school. The second concern that was raised by the counselors is that we see a direct correlation, as both my colleagues have shared, between the economic struggle that is taking place with a number of families and family dysfunction. Some families see an illegal or dysfunctional way of making ends meet as their only way of making ends meet. And we're seeing that on a regular basis. I can say, speaking from experience working in a senior school, we have a number of students who will stay at school after 3:30 because it's a structured environment to get homework done. They can ensure that they get homework done. It's a safe environment. And for some of them, they will get food even. And we've seen this increase at every level over the years. The need for students to be fed, clothed, and other financial resources given to the students. So there's a definite direct correlation between the economic struggle and the dysfunction that's taking place in the household. The other thing that counselors mentioned is that a lot of times we can identify the highest risk students early in their educational career. And although we can identify those high risk students and put a number of interventions in place, those interventions aren't always enough to prevent someone getting involved in violent crimes, gun violence, or illegal behavior later on. Schools have been addressing the issue of violence, I think, since it has become prevalent in the community. Schools have been conducting workshops for staff and students. We have body and organizations like the Family Center, we partner with them, Bermuda Youth Counseling Services, the Women's Resource Center, Team Services, the Bermuda Educators Network, and the school councils are partnering with all of these organizations in a hope to better provide information for our students. We're providing workshops starting with simple things like bullying and how bullying can lead to habitual antisocial type behavior and how that can lead to gang violence. And the type of gratitude that students are feeling at a young age through bullying or through being a bully, that same gratification continues when they get older and they want to hold somebody up at gunpoint for their selfing. It's the same type of gratification that they're feeling, the sense of belonging, the sense of feeling important, the sense of feeling powerful and dominant. So that we also see, but we need more of that. And as much as we're partnering with these outside organizations and we're providing individual counseling and group work within the schools, it's still not enough. We need the additional resources in order to do that. And that goes into the last thing. The school counselor program, as it stands right now, is a comprehensive program. And a lot of people, I don't think, is quite aware of what the school counselor program entails. It's a full component program, responsive services, which means we respond to any social, emotional need that may arise. So if a child needs one-on-one counseling, we will provide that. It's intended to be brief counseling because school counselors really can't afford to engage in long-term therapy with students. However, because of the limited resources that exist in the community, we find that a lot of counselors are seeing students year after year. For example, I'm an ASC4 counselor right now. I have some students who have been on my counseling caseload since S1, and I have referred them out, but if a referring agency can only see that child for therapy once every other month because their caseload is to be, then I have to see that child on a weekly basis, even if it's for 20 minutes. But that's not enough when you're talking about serious issues with a child. The other part to responsive service, outside responsive services, is individual planning. And that's where the school counselor helps students plan for their academic career, their future career in the workforce. We help them plan. We sit down with parents and with students. We help them select courses. We advise them on what courses they should take. At the lower levels, they expose children to the number of careers that are available, not only locally, but globally. We do things like career days, and we have professionals come in and speak to the students. So that's more the career aspect of the guidance counselor. Then we do classroom guidance, where we take topics like bullying, drug and alcohol education, good touch, bad touch, teen pregnancy, and we address them in the large group, which is age appropriate. At the primary and middle schools, they may go into the classroom and conduct a lesson. At the senior schools, we will go into advisory classrooms, or we will go into assemblies, or we will have student workshops. But the classroom guidance is really a forum for us to provide a lot of information that's relevant to that age group on a larger scale to the majority of the student body. Now, what happens is that if we present an issue on teen pregnancy, for example, there are always one or two students that identify themselves, a teacher identifies them, or a student identifies them as needing individual support or responsive services as a result of what comes out of classroom guidance. And the last component of the guidance program is system support. And system support is basically where the counselors support the system, the education system, the system within their individual schools, be it PTA meetings, be it lunch duties, or just assisting in the classroom, having outside clubs, key club, things like that. So that's what we do as system support. We support the system. We may not be the teacher, but we may be a teacher responsible for a club or something like that. Now there are 5 recommendations, each going with the concerns that I outlined. The first recommendation to address the fear and safety of students is to have the school resource officers, which are police officers, placed back in the schools on a more regular and visible basis, and not for security purposes, but to foster a healthy relationship between the students and the school resource officers. So the students can know and develop that positive relationship with the Bermuda Police Service. I can say that at Cedar Ridge, we had a school resource officer who was there on a regular basis. And I think when things escalated in the community as far as violence, he was pulled to other things. But students would speak to him if they knew something, and they knew him. They were familiar with him. He was just present during lunchtime, walking around, talking to the students, and it makes them feel safe. If someone heard that a fight was going to happen, they would go and tell him, and he was able to, intervene, or, things like that. So just to allow these students to feel safe, but also to foster a positive relationship between the students and the police. The second recommendation is we need more after-school programs. There are a lot of after-school programs that currently exist, but there can be a lot more. And the big issue as to why there aren't more is really funding. With teachers having to deal with what they have to do between 8:30 and 3:30, and sometimes providing tutorials after school, we need the funds in order to provide more sports-like activities, more leadership clubs, more volunteer community service clubs, to have breakfast, lunch, and perhaps dinner programs, because we have students who are coming to school with no money for food, they haven't eaten, they don't have lunch in their bag, and they're going home to maybe share something to eat with someone else. So,
I know we got the other recommendations that are here, and I see, great recommendations too. I think we should, but we're going to be over. And so what I want to do is to get a few questions in quickly from the panel. But we do have your recommendation, action recommendation too. I'm going to say.